So I'm Hannah Kate, and I am absolutely delighted to be here with Margie Warrell. And Margie is a best-selling author of 5 books, and they're called Stop Playing Safe, Find Your Courage, Make Your Mark, Train the Brave, and You've Got This. She's also a keynote speaker, coach, and CEO of her company, Global Courage Leadership. And it is just really wonderful to have you here. So welcome, Margie.
Lovely to see your face again, Hannah.
Yeah, it's so nice to see you too. And this month, we really wanted to talk about the vision, and you are just the perfect person, I feel, to sort of be in this month's topic with the work that you do. And also, so many of us have been through such a challenging year in 2020 and 2021. It's so important for us to be able to connect to our vision. But I think after the year that we've just had, so many people are like, what? How do I even do that? And how do I even move forward right now? And so, yeah, I think you'll be a great person to speak to. But before we even go into the topic of vision, it would be great to hear from you sort of what made you do the process in the first place. What kind of drew you to doing it?
Well, I met a guy at a conference a few years ago, probably 5 years ago now, and I was sharing with him what I do. I work in coaching and leadership development, and he said, "Oh, have you done the Hoffman process?" And I'd never heard of it, but he was just really grounded man. He was in a very senior leadership role, and I kind of noted away, oh, okay, this Hoffman thing. And then I looked it up, and it looked great, but it was going to take a lot of time, and I was busy. I had 4 kids. I'm like, I've got too much on. And then wind forward the clock, I moved country from Melbourne, Australia to Singapore, and I met this other guy, and we became good friends. And he was telling me about Hoffman, how it changed his life. And I was like, 2 amazing men that I've met who've done Hoffman and are raving about it. And so I just thought, I think I need to prioritize it. And then a few different things happened personally, and my husband was going through some work changes, and I thought, this is a good time for me to do it, because my husband said he would do it. And I'm like, okay, let's both do it. And we did it separately. But the truth is I have always been incredibly curious about any courses or programs that people say help us just be a better human and live a more rewarding life. And when people rave on about something, as they did Hoffman, it's just, to me, it's like, okay, I'm up for it. I just want to learn what this is about. And whether I like it or not is not the point. I just want to explore it. If it's got something to do with the human condition, I'm curious and open to learning.
Yeah, and that's what's interesting, I think, with you is, and we discussed this, is like some people have that kind of resistance about going in because they're afraid of what they're going to go into. But I think with you, it's completely different. It's like, I want to dive into it. I want to dive head first into it and see what I can take from it. So thank you so much for sharing that. I think that's really powerful. I think there'll be a few people that connect with that too. So you've written 5 best-selling books. Is a huge achievement. You've spoken, keynote speaker at many places around the world. Your latest book is called You've Got This, which is all about doubting yourself less and trusting yourself more, which I think is so deeply linked with the thing of vision. It's because I think a lot of the time, the thing that holds us back from stepping forward into the things that we desire is things like doubt and not being able to trust ourselves into that space. Can you tell me a bit more about the book and maybe link that to how you feel about people's year ahead?
Yeah, look, it was 2 different, I guess, reasons why I wrote You've Got This, and that concept of self-trust and self-doubt. So I grew up on a dairy farm in rural Victoria, big sister of 7 kids. And I feel like I have had a wrestling match with self-doubt for all of my life, as far back as I sort of remember, 4 or 5, 6 years of age, and doubt, these beliefs, these stories we spin in our heads that we're not good enough, that we can't do things, that if we try we'll fail, that we're not worthy, we need to be more of something before we should start. Having had those thoughts so many times, I've come to realize how often we give them so much more power than they should get, and we let them sit in the driver's seat. And so in my work, I do a lot helping other people overcome their self-doubts, but I guess I do it because I've had to work so hard at defying my own. And so that was one of the reasons. And then I wrote You've Got This. And then a second one was, in the last few years, have dealt with a lot of derailed plans, a lot of disruption, a lot of disappointment that ended up with my children dispersed across the world in a circumstance that I never saw myself being in. That's before 2020 happened. Yeah. And I had to really look within myself for certainty. Like, okay, when everything's outside my control, who do I want to be? How do I want to show up? How do I want to deal with these circumstances that are so far from the ones that I thought I would be in and I'd worked toward? And so I had to tell myself, and actually a few friends said to me, Margie, you've got this. And I was like, do I? And they're like, yeah, you've totally got this. And how much I valued hearing those words. And so in 2019, decided to write You've Got This to help people trust that in the midst of difficult times and challenging times, that they have everything inside them to meet each moment as it arises, but also that we're capable of more than we think, and that we should set our sights on a vision for our lives that inspires us. And so yeah, it's what inspired me to write You've Got This. And of course, having no idea that the book would come out in 2020, in a year like none other, where our own trust in our ability to deal with life was really challenged, and a lot of people felt very ungrounded, like the rug had been pulled out beneath them and the floor beneath that. And so in fact, there's no irony lost on me, Hannah, that the week that You've Got This was coming out, I was due to fly from Singapore to the US to do this speaking tour, book promotion tour. And my husband flew in from New York to Singapore and ultimately had a fever and ended up in hospital with COVID. And I got put into a 2-week quarantine. And there I was, instead of doing this book tour, I was actually literally having to tell myself, I've got this, you know, like dealing with these circumstances that felt incredibly overwhelming at the time. Wow. So I really believe that most of us, Hannah, buy into stories about who we are that sell us short and that keep us from doing the very things that would allow us to realize how little reason we ever did need to doubt ourselves. And so I believe that who we are as humans, we have so much potential in us. But to quote William James, the psychologist, most people live in a very restricted circle of their potential. And the reason we do that is because of the beliefs and the doubts that we buy into and the fears that we have. And so many which are formed as children, and not necessarily intentionally by our parents, but you know, we start telling ourselves stories and buying into beliefs and getting into patterns of behavior that we're not conscious of, but which can hold us back in so many ways and undermine our relationships and keep us from really blossoming into who we have it within us to be as humans.
Yeah, absolutely. I really appreciate everything that you just said. I think so many people will really, really connect to it. And it sounds like that book, I mean, it's wild that it came out exactly the same time. It's almost like the universe, like, you know,
yeah.
Description, you know, like in that form, you know, that we're sent through these challenges and that they come through to us like that. And I think it's something that a lot of people would connect to and really benefit from, you know.
And I think one of the things of 2020 that, for us to, how do you use 2020 as a catalyst to make your future better than it might have been before? And you can describe what's better mean. And I think this year has challenged anyone who has been living on sort of superficial values. For a lot of people have been financially hit. I've been financially hit. There's been incredible hardship and heartache. And yet it doesn't have to all be for naught. In fact, we can use it as a catalyst for good and to transform our futures, to take them to another level of our experience of being alive. Like what is that made up of? What is it to be human? And so much of it is shaped by the emotions that we're feeling and how we're interpreting life and processing our experience of the circumstances around us. And I think that just because life is hard doesn't mean it's bad.
Yeah.
And just because we go through difficulty doesn't mean that that's going to define our future. I mean, all of us get to define who we are and the future we want to create, regardless of the circumstances we find ourselves in or the experiences we've had. And to me, that's what it is to live really powerfully, is to not be defined by what's going on around you, but to be very self-defined. And at the core of that is, to me, where our power lives. And frankly, the process that Hoffman takes you through helps you, this is my language, connect to that power and to be very grounded in your own power, and even a power greater than ourselves. And that's everything, particularly when you're going through tough times.
Yeah, definitely. It makes me think of, there's a saying that you're only given what you can carry. And a lot of people, again, that's around your own perception. But if you think about it as in, okay, I'm just really strong, you know, and actually it's making me stronger. And then when something else comes, I've already built up those muscles, and, you know, it enables you to take it on in a different way. And I think when you're completely right, it's about building the strength of yourself within. It's like a grounding down of the root of the trees, and then it stops you, you know, being blown over in the slightest breeze when something comes. Even when there's chaos around you, you're still holding yourself in that space. And I think the Hoffman does give you the tools to be able to do that, you know?
Yeah,
That power.
absolutely. And I think that metaphor of the tree is such a powerful one. You know, the oaks lay deeper roots when the winds blow strong. And when we're going through adversity, we're forced often to ground ourselves more deeply in what matters and in our own capacity for life. And when life's easy and cruising along, and hey, I don't mind if life a little bit easy. I feel like after the last couple of years, I'm like, I could do it a little bit easy. But when it is difficult, that's when we learn the most about ourselves too. And it's when we build those muscles for life. And I often think, you know, I've in my family, we've had our share of tragedies and difficulties. I've had my own struggles, lots and lots of struggles. And I think, yeah, but they've introduced me to dimensions of who I am and aspects of who I am that I would never have dealt with. And I actually had an eating disorder through my teens and into my 20s. And I had a lot of shame around it. I didn't want to tell any about it. I was sort of pretty high functioning, like no one knew, but I struggled with this debilitating cycle, and I had bulimia, and it was the work that I needed to do on myself, the deep inner work in my 20s that ultimately set me off on the trajectory that I'm on now in my early 50s. And I look back on the struggles that I had, and I can only be grateful, because I wouldn't be who I am today had I not had those struggles and other struggles and difficulties. And so it's easy to curse away at our problems and go, oh, it shouldn't be this way. Life shouldn't be like this. These people shouldn't be like this. This job, boss, economy, the world shouldn't be like this. But it is as it is. And the more we can surrender to how it is, it allows us to look for the opportunities it holds to teach us things and for us to grow in who we are.
Yeah, I really, really appreciate everything that you just said then, and I deeply connect to it myself with my own story. So I think a lot of people watching would appreciate it too, because, you know, again, that's something that it really taught me on the process as well, is that vulnerability is also our greatest strength. As well as our pain being our power, our vulnerability is too. And it really enables us to connect, you know, as humans in a different way, because we realize that we're all just going through a journey, and it's our perception and our vision and our view of any given thing that defines our reality in that moment. And I think you really spoke into that so well just then. And I think, yeah, for a lot of people, if that's one thing that they can work on sort of in 2021, is creating that space within themselves. I think that enables people's vision to come to fruition more powerfully when, you know, you have that.
Yeah. And I think a little bit, and on that term vulnerability, if in a sense, our ability to, it's not comfortable, but the more comfortable we can get with those uncomfortable emotions and the vulnerability, this raw, sometimes sick in the bottom of your stomach feeling, the less power they hold over us. And it's our fear of being vulnerable that can actually then drive our lives, because we're so scared of being exposed, and we're so scared of feeling certain emotions, like being rejected or being exposed as unworthy or not good enough or not lovable enough. And when we're willing to go to those places and feel it, we realize actually it doesn't kill us, that we're still here. It's okay. I can literally go through the worst and I'm still okay. That's incredibly empowering to know that. And I think that it's through vulnerability. I actually have a whole chapter on it, and You've Got This, that we can access our greatest strength. Because if you're trying to prove that you're strong, you're still proving. If you're trying to prove anything, you're still just proving, versus just being grounded in knowing I am. I don't have to prove anything to anyone. I just am. And to operate from that place, you know, I don't have to prove I'm smart or I'm successful or I'm lovable or I'm attractive or I'm worthy. Just be that. And it's a very liberating place to live life from.
Yeah, that's incredibly powerful. It's almost like it's teaching through being. You just are. There's no need to like be anything for anyone. You just are by being. And that's, I think that again goes through to the tree thing. You know, it's like when there's that person who just is that strong, powerful, you know, tree that's just is. The tree doesn't need to prove itself to anyone. It
doesn't compare itself to other trees. Like, it doesn't go, oh, I'm bigger, taller, fatter, skinnier, shorter. You know, it's just like my leaves come and go and yours stay all year, or it just is, right? And I think actually brings me to something that I got from Hoffman that was really powerful for me, and how much I could default very quickly into patterns, to use this language of patterns, into a pattern of comparing myself to other people. But usually in negative ways. You're like, oh, I'm not petite as they are, I'm not as creative as they are, or I'm not as disciplined, or I'm not as, you know, blah, blah, blah. I don't have the singing voice they do, or I'm not good as entrepreneurial as they are, or, you know, you name it, or as good with money, or, you mean, the list could go on forever, right? And I think just recognizing how much that just leaves us living in a place of inadequacy and closes down what our ability to go on. Well, what are you? You just be 100% brilliant in what you are. You know, like, we're not all meant to be mountain climbers, or we're not all meant to be, you know, creative artists, or we're not all meant to be anything. You know, like every one of us is gifted for something important, and focus on what it is you're gifted for, and let other people do what they're gifted for, because they've got their own challenges, their own struggles, their own insecurities, their own crosses to bear. You just run your own best race. And for me, just recognizing when, because I still get called, I still notice myself, I get pulled into it again, and then I move into blame. But I catch myself more quickly. So it's not that I don't have those, I still have the doubts come up and all that, but I catch myself more quickly, so that I don't sit there in the driver's seat. I'm like, there I go again, and can kind of laugh at it almost, and then, okay, refocus.
Yeah, what you said is so great, because I think the process, the thing that it does so well, even though it's not going to like wipe off all these things, you know, that you've been playing out for most of your life, certainly what it does is it gives you this level of awareness that enables you to then make a choice between what you're choosing to do. Are you going to choose to play out that behavior, or are you going to choose to re-navigate, redirect, and, you know, do something else? And I think you're so right. Like when it comes to something like a pattern of comparison, which I deeply connect to myself, it's like when you're on the race of life and you're running, you know, if you start looking at what someone else is doing, you're going to go out of your lane. And it's like, stay in your lane, you know, because that's your lane. It's a very special one that you've been gifted with. And it's like,
but often we can so easily measure it as though we measure it's like measuring beauty by waist size or eye color or something. It's like that's a ridiculous unit, one-dimensional unit to measure something from. And we can measure success by money or the size of a house or what they're doing or fame or something. It's like really being so careful and cognizant of how we measure things. And secondly, I think it was Viktor Frankl who was survived the Holocaust, wrote a book, and Man's Search for Meaning. And he wrote about how our greatest power between stimulus and response, there is a space. And in that space is our ability to choose our response. And in that choice is our freedom and our power. And I think it's bringing it out of transparency. It's so easy to live as a hostage to unconscious patterns and unconscious stories, unconscious beliefs. Like they're transparent. We don't even realize we're in a straitjacket. We just go through life in a straitjacket. And once you realize you're in it, you're like, oh, I'm doing that again. But until someone shines a light on it and helps you realize it, you're just trapped by it. We trapped ourselves. And so the more transparent that is to us, the more we can go, there I am again.
yeah.
And I would say there's no just arriving. I'd love to say, there's a course or a program or a book and you read it and you're done. Like, oh yeah, now I've got life. I mean, man, I go back and look at my journals. I've kept journals for 40 years. And I go back and look at my journals in my 20s and I go, oh my God, I'm still journaling on the same bloody things I was journaling on at 21. And I'd like to think I'm a bit further along in my own personal evolution, but some of the same stuff still comes up. And I think that is what it is to be human, that we're all in a process of becoming, of tripping over, picking ourselves up and hopefully along the way, you know, living at higher levels. But I think there's very few people that would say they've arrived, and anyone who says they've really arrived, that's a pretty good sign. Usually they haven't arrived.
And actually, I think life would be so much less exciting and mysterious and curious if we just arrived. You know, the discovery and the exploration and the highs and the lows are part of the experience, I think. Also, you know, but I think what the process has enabled me to do certainly is be able to ride the waves with less feeling like I'm drowning and more feeling like I'm navigating them, you know, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I think there's a term that I have on my podcast, my Live Brave podcast. I interviewed a woman called Dr. Kristen Neff, and she is an expert on self-compassion, and it's something I've really tried to practice a lot more in the last few years. Being kind to myself, because I'm really, really bloody brilliant at beating myself up and being a critic, my own harshest critic. And I've had to really practice the muscle, literally practice being kinder to myself. And when I fall and fail and am fallible, because I am, instead of beating myself up and going, you know what, Margie, you're not perfect. You never will be. It's okay. And I think as you go through the learning, as we all ride those waves, is being kind to ourselves in our fallen moments and giving ourselves permission to be human and to be fallible and to fall down. And I think the more we can forgive ourselves in those moments, the more it actually allows us to connect with others with greater harmony in our relationships, far more deeply, and with less tension and less stress and less, we don't hold on to the anger and how could they have done that, and that idiot or that bastard or whatever it is, because you know what? They're just human too. And maybe we thought they should be perfect and should do better and know better. But you know what? They're struggling with their own stuff. And I think that's something I really work to try and do better at, is being kind to myself, and also just cutting others some slack as well. They're on their own journey. They haven't arrived. They've got their own fears and their own patterns from their childhood as well, that every now and again come up and nip them on the bum. And so we all can get pulled into that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we're all just these humans that are doing the best we can with what we have, and all seeing it through our own little vision and view. But I think so much of what you've said is so powerful, and I think even just the embracing of what you've talked about with like vulnerability that you have in your book, and the compassion side of things, and I think all of these elements, as we move into the year ahead, I think being able to embrace some of those and to lean into some of those parts of ourselves more will create more peaceful, better humans in so many ways.
I would say just want to make mention of what I believe it's really important to be moving toward a future that inspires us, that's compelling in some way, that tugs on our heartstrings in some way, that gives us a sense of meaning or purpose, or ignites passion in who we are and what our future's about. And after a year like 2020, it's easy to feel a bit ruffled, like, heck, I know a lot of my plans completely derailed, but then again, I've had a few years of that, so I'm kind of feel a bit practiced in that. But I do think it's important to take a little bit of time to reflect on what have I learned, and to recharge, but also to reset on a vision, I use the language of an invented future, rather than what's the default future that I'm just going to roll into if I do nothing. But what's an invented future that inspires me? What would I love to do more of? What would I like to do less of? Who are the kind of people I want to spend more time hanging out with? What's something that lights me up? And doesn't matter what anyone else is doing, but what is it that lights me up? And I've just moved country, and as I sit and look at 2021, I know myself, I'm like, okay, well, what is it that it's inspiring for me in the years ahead? And it's not just about inertia that's being pushed along because of what's happened before, but that may be a whole new thing. And so I just encourage people to take a little bit of time to do that. Like, what's something that this time in 12 months time, you'd feel really good to look back on and go, I feel really good about what I've done, and in particular, how I've showed up for life in that intervening time.
Yeah, I think that's such a powerful thing for people to go through, and I really honor you for sharing those things. I think there'd be really great ways for people to connect more to their vision for the year ahead. And I really would encourage everyone to take a look at your book. It's perfect timing.
Thank you. I didn't realize coming on here for the book to get a plug, but hey, I'm more than happy for the plug. So thank you, Hannah.
Well, I think it definitely deeply connects to vision. Yeah, I think both of us can say that the process has aided our journeys. I don't know if you wanted to close by just sort of sharing what the main thing you took away from this experience for you was.
Oh, wow. I got some extremely powerful breakthroughs that I could spend hours talking about, but one, the ability to recognize my patterns of behavior and to recognize when I'm being pulled into them, so that I have my patterns and my patterns don't have me, was pretty powerful. But I think just a far deeper sense of my own adequacy.
Wow.
And I connected to my worthiness and my adequacy in just incredibly profound levels. And that made the time for me. My biggest concern going in was, I hope this isn't a waste of my time. I'm very busy and I hope I'm not going to go, I had better ways to use that, 9-10 days. I had to fly from Singapore to Australia to do it. It was 10 days out, which was a lot. but it was absolutely worth it, absolutely worth it. I wished I had done it 20 years ago. I wished I had done it sooner. And I would just say to anyone, if you could spend 10 days of your life that forever changed your experience of life, that time, I mean, money, time is just extremely well spent. It's just a no-brainer to me to invest in your happiness. I mean, there's no better investment there is. You know, you might spend money on a holiday or a car or something. Invest in your very experience of life and your future. And it just, to me, it's just, I would encourage everybody on the planet to do Hoffman. It doesn't matter how great your life is or how terrific you feel about where you're at. If you just want to richer and dial it up even another level, just to go through that process, it's very powerful.
I loved what you said. Richer and dial it up a level. I think I would connect to that. It's been so wonderful to see you and for us to connect because we actually did the process together.
Yeah, we did. We absolutely did. And it was a joy getting to meet you and everybody. I miss everybody. It was just such a fantastic diverse collection of humans, but it was just such a rewarding, joy-filled experience. And so good to see you again, Hannah.
So good to see you, Margie, and thank you so much for your time. Take care.
Bye.